The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
You've always got time for Short Time.
Hey, it's Mario Lopez.
David Taylor.
Brent Metcalf. Johnny Hendricks. Tony Ramos. Bubba J.
Mike Golick.
Matthew Modine. The one and only Chael Sonnen. And you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
Welcome back to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryant here with you. As you heard during the intro, today we're going back to my home state of Virginia. It's something that I like to do frequently, is go back as much as I can. It only happens 2-3 times a year. But this gentleman I actually ran into at the Virginia Duels. His name is Jim Harshaw. You can find all about what he's doing at JimHarshawJr.com. He is the founder of the Success with Failure podcast, which has changed its name over the last several years. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Jim is an All-American at the University of Virginia, a former Division I head coach. You can hear all of this if you listen to the show because it's in his intro. But Jim, finally, you've been on Bonus Points. I've been on your show, but now welcome to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast.
I finally made it to the big time. This is kind of in the podcast world when you know you've made it is when you get on to Jason's show. So I'm at the pinnacle. It's all downhill from here. I'm going to probably retire after this. Well,
I mean, the thing is the longevity of this show. We're started in November of 2013 out of just an idea, and you can probably relate to this on how many different things that start as ideas with the entrepreneurial spirit. But right. For those unfamiliar with who Jim Harshaw is, what he does, you currently work at the University of Virginia. You're in the world of raising money and fundraising and things right. of that nature. You know, your exact day-to-day operations within athletics, and how did you end up back at the University of Virginia?
Yeah, like I said, I was an All-American in Virginia. I was a coach, Division I coach for 7 years, including a stint as the head coach at Slippery Rock before the program was dropped. And then it was dropped after I left. But I got into the entrepreneurial space for several years. And when I was doing sort of fundraising and social media marketing consulting. And that's when UVA sort of approached me and they said, "Hey, we have an opening," and it was just a good fit. I knew all the coaches from all the sports across the staffs and the administration and whatnot. So it was a good fit, easy to jump on board, and a great place to be. It's my alma mater, and I love it. University of Virginia, it's a great place.
Is it something that you think is in the water with how we as wrestling people are? Is like we'll gravitate to jobs at our alma mater. You look at the number of college head coaches that are coaching at their alma mater across all divisions. It's like it seems like the dream job is always to work where you went to school. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, it's probably any sport, I think people feel that way, but wrestling's a little bit different in that we have that. It's so personal. Wrestling, everything about wrestling is just so personal and so deep and so meaningful that maybe it's a little more special with wrestling. I wanted to come back here. I wanted to be on the side where I can help wrestling, not only, all the sport, not only wrestling, but all the sports. So I raise money for football, basketball, you name it. I mean, all the sports, but I'm sort of the liaison for wrestling, of course. And so to be back here helping Coach Garland run the program and be sort of a support staff for him and provide the funding that he needs to be successful. Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and it's great to be back in my alma mater. I think like a lot of people probably feel that way about their alma mater, especially wrestlers.
Yeah, and one thing about University of Virginia that I find intriguing is its shift. There was a time that UVA could have gone one way. It could have gone to, okay, we're going to basically stay regional. We're not going to go national. We're just going to compete with, at the time, probably the James Madisons, the local teams. We're not going to try to be a national player. And then there was the other direction, and part of that first part was maybe cutting scholarships and making things non-scholarship. And that's a lot of places, that's a hard spot to be in. But Craig Littlepage, the director of athletics at UVA, says, no, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to invest more in our programs. And when you're in that position of raising funds, think about what could have been your job and what it is now, and how much being a nationally competitive all sports program makes your job that much easier, although it does probably make it that much tougher.
Yeah, you're right. So I was actually the assistant wrestling coach at the time. Lenny Bernstein was the head coach, and the athletic department, this was in the early 2000s, 01, 02, and the athletic department was running a budget deficit every year, and they brought in some consultants who said, here's what we recommend. You tier the sports. You have a top tier that's fully funded. You have a middle tier that has, some scholarships and, some full-time assistant coaches staff. And then the bottom tier is going to be 0 scholarships, no assistant coaches, and a regional travel budget. And that's it. More or less a glorified, still varsity, but more or less glorified club program. And it was funny, Jason. Me, Lenny, the head baseball coach at the time, Dennis Womack, and it was golf and tennis, I think. All the head coaches and myself and 1 or 2 assistants, when this news came out, obviously we're ticked, so we were like, hey, let's go meet. We got to get off, get away from the university and go sit down and have a meeting somewhere. So we went over to try to meet at the Starbucks, and there were no seats at the Starbucks. So we walked next door to the Barnes & Noble, and there were no seats, like really tables for us to sit. But someone was like, yeah, there's a table in the back in the kids section. So we walked to the very back of the Barnes & Noble, found the kids section. There was a table that was about knee high, and there were these little kids stools, and like the 6 of us sat around this table, and it was so appropriate because we felt like we were the little kids sitting at the little table that they got kicked away from the big kids table because they were pulling away of all of our funding. But yeah, Craig Littlepage, the athletic director, had a vision. He said, we're a premier institution, a world-class institution. We should be able to fund a world-class athletic department. And that's when everything turned around. And we went from about 4.5 or 5 scholarships for wrestling to fully funded 9.9. And we did that in all of our sports. We were about 85% funded at the time, where they were going to reduce the funding across the board for all the sports. But they actually, like you said, did an about face 180 and 180 degrees. And just, we raised the money and now we fully fund 25 sports, and we're one of the top athletic departments in the country, consistently ranked in the top 10. Last 3 years in a row, we've been across the board. And when you rank all the sports together in the Directors Cup, the Learfield Directors Cup, we've been a top 10 athletic department, and wrestling's been a part of that.
Yeah, and also part of that is you talked about the baseball coach. There's a national championship there in baseball, and then I realized this is not a baseball show, but there is also, there kids from my high school have gone on to play at UVA and at Virginia Tech, and it's just kind of, now both of those guys are in the majors, so it's kind of cool to see, even though I went to what would be considered a rival college, even though Virginia and Old Dominion don't really cross a whole lot of paths in so many sports. Right. It's not like Virginia Tech, Virginia, and anything like that, the Commonwealth Cup, but sure. There's still that. There's little pokes here and there, but when you see what could have, I'm wondering what your conversation is like with the baseball coach. This could have been, their fate could have been, all right, we're playing the Elons of the world versus playing for a national championship.
National championship, on the biggest stage, winning the national championship 2 years ago. And the year before that, they were in the national finals and they lost. Actually, they lost to Vanderbilt that year, and then the year later they actually beat Vanderbilt in the final game, the final series. And and golf, I think golf and tennis were both on the chopping block too, in terms of the funding. Our golf teams, men's and women's, and this is going to be the men's. I think we're going to be pulled funding pulled. They're a top 10 program, and the tennis team has won 3 of the last 4 national championships. It's insane. So I mean, it's a great school. It's a great campus, we call it grounds here, and it's great education. It's a great conference in the ACC. It's an easy place to recruit to, and when you put the funding behind it, then really good things can happen, as evidenced with Garland. I mean, he's won 2 ACC championships now, and ranked took the program into the top 10 in the country for the first time in the history of the program, and it's really come a long way. And whether we like it or not, money has a lot to do with that. And tell you what, Jason, we can go down this rabbit hole if you want, but I don't think a lot of people understand in the wrestling world how challenging the fundraising climate has gotten in the past year, really, because of the full cost of attendance measures, which basically expands the definition of a full athletic scholarship to include the expenses portion. So basically, for us in Virginia, it was a $1.3 million hit overnight when the NCAA said, yes, we will allow schools to now pay for the, quote, full cost of attendance, as opposed to just tuition fees, room, board, and books. Now the expenses portion, which is actually part of the calculation for financial aid, which could not be covered by athletics in the past. Now it can. So for us, it was 1.3 million. I think Tech was probably somewhere in the similar ballpark. And this is, of course, for all the sports. And it's a great thing for the athletes to get to cover their expenses for the full scholarship athletes. But I tell you what, it's a real. Boston College was the only Power 5 conference school who had the guts, really, I think, to vote against it. Everybody felt like they had to vote for it, because if they said no, and they still did it, they'd be going against their own word. But also, it's like nobody can afford this, and it's getting harder and harder for the Division I schools to afford any non-revenue sport. I mean, I'd put wrestling in the same bucket as soccer and lacrosse and swimming and everything else. So it's an interesting time we're in Division I athletics.
Yeah, we hear about budgets all the time, and I want to also point out that since UVA made that push to fully fund and not tier the sports, the University of Virginia's wrestling program has seen the benefits, of course, coupled with Steve Garland's hiring. But you were an All-American in 99. Steve was in the national finals in 2000. But then the next All-American came in 2004 when Foley and Scott Moore placed. But since that gap between Scott Moore and Steve Garland, between there, 10 of the 17 All-Americans all time have come since that push to fully fund wrestling. So you see the difference it makes. Virginia's All-Americans, and I'm looking this up just because I need to prove a point. 1957, that guy was Henry Jordan, is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, by the way. You had 2 in 89, 94, you and Matt Roth in 99, and Steve Garland in 2000. That was it from 2000 all time. Now, since then, you've got 10 more, including, three-timers like Chris Henrik and Nick Sulzer. So you see where the funding can give a program that life. I mean, you've seen it also at Old Dominion, fully funded now. Steve Martin's produced 8 All-Americans in his tenure there. But now we're in that cost of attendance. I'm glad you are going down this rabbit hole, because I'm curious, when you've got, Virginia Power 5 school, with a great academic reputation in a solid conference that's seen the growth of wrestling, with Pitt coming in, with Virginia Tech, Virginia. We've seen North Carolina State raise their profile, their wrestling profiles. And then all of a sudden, guys like you who have to go out and fundraise, now you've got an extra $1.3 million line item sitting on your desk overnight. So when it comes to speaking with donors and alumni and things like that, how do you put your wrestling hat on and be like, well, there's probably a little bit of an agenda. It's like, okay, I got to get this because we need to make sure wrestling stays here.
Yeah. So you don't want to sound the alarm bells, because I mean, certainly there's no alarm bells here, but like you can see the writing on the wall nationally that you have to raise more money. I mean, I tell, like, the guys that I was teammates with, I'm like, listen, you got to make a gift. I don't care what level your gift is. You need to make a gift back to wrestling. I don't care if it's $25 or $25,000, whatever you can afford, make a gift back. And I urge everybody listening to this show right now, if you are a wrestling fan, open up your wallet, make a gift back to your alma mater. If you're a college wrestler, make a gift back to your alma mater. If you wrestle in high school, make a gift back to your high school wrestling team or your local college. Make a gift at any level. I mean, it just a gift at any level shows a vote of support. So, it's something that I have that discussion with swimming alumni and track alumni, et cetera. So it's not just wrestling, but if we love wrestling, we need to show it with our donations, because and I'm not one of the proponents of seeing wrestling as a charity. Wrestling needs to be a business. It needs to be big business. And I'm all for wrestling becoming more of a business and having more businesses depending upon the health of the sport, because when more businesses depend upon the health of the sport's going to be more self-sustaining. So I'm not the guy out there trying to get everybody just to give the wrestling and seeing it as a charity. But the fact is, college athletics is funded by donations. And the donations come in primarily because of football, second because of basketball. Everything else is an expense. So if you're in business, if you're an athletic director and you see all these expenses and a couple sources of revenue, and really, I think Division I is still just 8 women's sports and 6 men's sports is all you need to have a Division I program. I think that's the case. Don't quote me on it, but that's what it used to be.
Yeah, that is the minimum. 14 and 6 is the minimum for men. And a lot of times you'll see that be cross country and track take up two of those sports, even though they're using the same athletes in some of those events.
Yeah. And you look at the SEC, they don't have men's soccer. They don't have wrestling. I mean, they don't have a lot of sports. They're pumping everything into football. And football more and more is driving college athletics. And we've seen this. We know this. I mean, people are building $50 million dedicated football buildings. And you can say all you want. And this is, I'm a wrestling fan as much as anybody, of course. You can say all you want that we're spending too much money on football. Yes. I mean, there's a lot of money spent on football. That's the way it's going right now. And right now, what we can do is promote the sport, do things that are going to get more butts in the stands, give back to our programs, support our teams, and there's the whole singlet issue. You know what I mean? On this side of it, I think people, some people hate singlets, some people love singlets, some people think they should stay, some people think they should go. I'm on the side of the fence where I think they should go, and here's why. Being in the role of an athletics administrator, I see opportunities for wrestling to be pictured here, there, and other places in different marketing materials, et cetera. And I don't care about a singlet. It doesn't look awkward or weird to me, but for the people who are outside of the sport, it does. And pictures don't go in certain publications, or certain pictures can't be used. They're like, we don't have any good pictures of wrestlers, so we're going to put a track person in there, or basketball, or football, whatever. And it's like there are real and practical reasons for changing this thing. There are real and practical reasons for treating the sport like a business so that we can grow this thing.
And from the magazine perspective, and working with websites, I'm going to be quite honest with you folks. The ton of shots I crop at the waist for obvious reasons, and having to run a magazine, there's certain was like, okay, can we, no, you know what, it's for the non-wrestling people out there, that is something that gets paid attention to. So, and you're going to sit there and have a think of if I think Nick Gwizdowski was talking about this, like they had a big picture of him and they had to crop the waist because the administration wasn't comfortable with like a big 6-foot junk shot, okay, right. For lack of a better term. But anyway, I see where you're going with that. And it's controversial. And I know, I've gotten in battles with people on Twitter about this before, and I get the other side. I do. I've been wrestling since I was 6 years old, wrestling year round since I was in middle school. Like, I could care less about singing. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother you. I would go watch wrestling if they were wearing freaking tutus. I don't care. It doesn't matter to us. But it's not about us. I was an overweight kid who got into it as a teenager. I hated wearing the damn thing.
Yeah,
I got over it. But the thing is, I wasn't seeing the mat that much either. So it wasn't really, it's not like I had to wear it a couple times. It's not like I'm out there 100 times, throughout a career going, okay, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway.
Some people will get over it, and some won't. And some people say, the kid who won't get over it, we don't need him anyway. Well, we kind of do. You know what I mean?
Not everybody's born tough. It's kind of the angle there. I mean, you'll get tough, but you're not necessarily born that way.
Yeah. Amen.
Anyway, now as we're a lot of rabbit hole. I think that's the thing. We're going to have Jim on again later because there's so many different. I've got a page full of notes right here. I'm like, man, this is another topic. That's the best thing about the podcast world is you can come back and revisit stuff, or it's as long as it needs to be. That being said, Jim will center back on what you're doing at JimHarshawJr.com. And you talked a little bit about once you left Slippery Rock and getting in the entrepreneurial space. Of course, Riot Sports Marketing really was one of the first groups out there that really kind of taught wrestling programs how to leverage social media. We've seen Court Cooper do that with elite level sports marketing. Now he's really doing a great job with the NWCA and the Best of Brand and that type of thing. But when we look at the entrepreneurial space now, where you're in, maybe not entrepreneurial space, you are an entrepreneur, but I think some people look at that term now and look, internet marketer and put a black mark on it. You're actually producing the podcast with Success with Failure, where you're interviewing people who have made gains based on their failures. You've also had a TED Talk. You've got a lot of stuff going on the side outside of your position with UVA. And let's just talk about the evolution of where you've come from Riot Sports Marketing to now your show, your blog, and even the TED Talk.
Yeah, thanks. So it definitely has been an evolution, So about 5 years, I guess it was about 2 years ago now, I should say, in terms of the TED Talk that you mentioned. That just came about through sort of an opportunity locally here in Charlottesville, hosts one of the biggest TED events in the world. It's actually in the top 1% of biggest TED events in the world. And I got selected through an application process to do a talk called "Why I Teach My Children to Fail," and it was by and large wrestling. There's a lot of wrestling in that experience about learning about failure and how failure is the path to success. And so after I shut down Riot Sports Marketing, so for the listener who doesn't know what that was, it was basically a software that I built to help grassroots sports teams. Of course, wrestling was what I had in mind. Help them really get their message out. And I think it was maybe a little bit early. You had sort of some early adopters like Mike Derone and some other coaches who came on board early and stuck with me for throughout. And we had a sort of a core group of coaches who were really interested in marketing their programs that came on board, but in the long run, it really didn't get the legs that it needed to sustain itself. So I shut that down and came back to the University of Virginia. And then I did this TEDx talk a couple of years ago, and that just sort of led to speaking opportunities that they were just kind of coming out of the woodwork. I didn't even, wasn't really even interested in soliciting for those, and they started coming up. So I've been doing that more and more, doing some public speaking, and then I started the podcast about maybe. I guess the talk was over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and then the podcast came about 6 months later. And so, I've been doing the podcast for almost 100 episodes now, between about 80-some interview episodes and another 10 or 12 solo episodes. And, so I started out, as you mentioned, Jason, earlier in the show, you mentioned that, started out, this is the third name change. So it was Wrestling with Greatness and then Wrestling with Success, and then I changed it to Success Through Failure to sort of broaden it. It wasn't just – so I actually started out with interviewing just wrestlers. I mean, you know who some of my guests were, Jason. I mean, you helped me early on kind of get this thing off the ground, and you were one of my guests. And I've had, a lot of names that people recognize: Coit Cooper and Jake Herbert, Andy Rovat, Kyle Maynard, and David Pottruck from Penn, and Greg Hatcher was another one who was down in Arkansas and bought all the wrestling mats. And then I started digging up some people who most people didn't know were wrestlers, like Seth Goldman. He's the CEO of Honest Tea, and different guys like that who just people didn't know that they had a wrestling background, and I was able to bring them to the forefront and kind of highlight their wrestling experience and really paint wrestling in a great light in terms of leadership and self-development. And so I've just kind of gone along these lines, and I've turned what I've learned as a wrestler and how you take that and apply that to your life to be successful at life. And I put it into a course called Reveal Your Path. And I've had 40-some people go through it. And it's been absolutely incredible and rewarding and fun to watch people grow and develop through these lessons that I learned through wrestling, but also through the guests that I've had on my podcast. So that's where I'm at right now. It's been a great journey and great evolution.
Yeah, two of my favorite episodes, and one is back with I believe you were still in the Wrestling with Success, or I'm not sure where about the show was your interview with Bob Bowlesby, or for people who are unfamiliar, he is the
episode 36. Yeah,
commissioner of the Big 12 Conference, advocate for wrestling, former wrestler, I guess once a wrestler, always a wrestler, the AD at Stanford and Iowa. People know the name Bob Bowlesby. That was a tremendous one. That's when I was listening to my car. I went and listened to that one again because it was that good, and I rarely do that. And then a recent one with a professional wrestler, and so there's still the people that don't necessarily like the crossover or relationship between what we do as the college Olympic and amateur, for lack of a better term, and the pro wrestling. But Diamond Dallas Page was a tremendous interview, and this is a guy people have seen because he's been more of in the health world. We've seen him in DDP Yoga, which is his main product, how he's brought back some of his colleagues from the brink of death, really. And I found that to be a really engaging episode. And people don't know, Jim and I are having a kind of an unspoken race to see which one of us can get Tim Ferriss on our show first. And I got people that are really close to him, and I'm just, it's like, it's going to be one of those things. Gotcha, Jim, gotcha. But
I know. Mario Lopez is another one. Have you had him on yet?
Yeah, I got Mario. I got him about a year and a half ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I had Matthew Modine as part of the whole Vision Quest arc I did, the 30-year anniversary. But Sage
There's
Karen.
There's a ton of wrestlers. I mean, and you know this. There are so many people out there that are just really successful that have a wrestling background. It's amazing. The more I had someone tell me like a while back, like, oh, you probably changed the name of your podcast and kind of sort of broadened it out and started bringing in other non-wrestlers too, because you ran out of wrestlers. And I'm like, not even close, man. Like not even close. There were so many people out there that have a wrestling background that I could have had on my show that I'm still working on some of them. So.
Yeah, we're looking. I mean, Boss Rutan was another one. You know, there's so many combat sport type of crossovers. You know, Joe DeSena from Spartan Race. He's got the Spartan Race has a podcast which features wrestling quite frequently. They love Kyle Dake, and I'm gonna go.
They had Kyle Dake, and they had Nate Carr, they had Clint Wattenberg and Rob Cole. They've had a ton of wrestlers on there. He loves wrestling, and I've talked to Joe Joe DeSena several times, and his kids wrestle. He actually said on one of his podcasts, he was interviewing, this wasn't like a regular wrestler guy that anybody would know, but he was interviewing a guy who brought up, incidentally, he was like, yeah, I wrestled when I was growing up. And he's like, you know what, is that the solution? He goes, is that the answer? Should everybody get singlet and everybody have to wrestle for 1 year in their life? And so I thought he's definitely a diehard wrestling fan.
You know, Jake Herbert would love to hear that, and he would love to be the guy who's like, okay, we need to teach you to do this before you can do it. So that's like, that would be like his perfect storm. Okay, everybody's got to wrestle. All right, everybody's got to use my program and have the basic skills to know how to wrestle.
Base wrestling. Yeah.
Now, as we talk about the part about failure, and this is something that everybody in the sport of wrestling has experienced, some more frequently than others. Like I'm raising my hand, and I definitely lost a lot more than I won. But, you know, Cael Sanderson, even during his redshirt year, took a loss. He never won a world championship. There's failure in even the greatest of wrestlers. And what have you found with your interviews and people outside of the wrestling world that really kind of parallels the struggles that we deal with personally and maybe with our own athletic goals as wrestlers? Like, okay, well, I failed here. Where do you see the parallels between wrestling and business and all these great people that you've interviewed through your podcast?
Yeah, Jason, you know, the thing about success is, and I just have all these, like you said, incredibly successful people on the podcast, you know, UFC UFC champions and New York Times #1 best-selling authors and astronauts and, you know, billionaires. And the thing that they have in common is that they view failure differently, right? And we all sort of hear these niceties about failure. You know, it's like, oh, it's great to fail, and, you know, failure is, you know, learning. And it's like, but we're not looking for failure, right? We're obviously not seeking it. It's just something that happens on the path to success. And what happens with most people fail, and then they quit, or they give up, or they lower their goals, or they settle for less, or they kind of settle back into mediocrity. And I'm not just talking about big things like they go out and try to start a big company and it fails. I'm talking about like on a day-to-day basis. Like I'm trying to lose 10 pounds and I start my diet and I'm working out for a week and I check my weight the next week and I've gained a pound, or I've only lost a half a pound or something like that. So these little failures, they all build up to this self-doubt, right? But the people that I have on my show, it's interesting. I always ask them, tell me about a time you failed. You know, I've got some pretty deep, dark stories of failure from some of these folks. And it's interesting that they've failed too. We look at successful people and we see them winning, right? We see the Super Bowl champions winning. We see the NCAA champions getting their hand raised on the mat. And we don't see or learn or know about their failures and about their struggles and about their setbacks and about the deep, dark pains that they've experienced. So we just think that it was easy for them, right? We just think, oh, he's just gifted, right? We see a guy who's like got, you know, great hips or something like that, and you know, he wiggle, you know, defends some shot or something. And we're like, he's gifted, man, he's talented, right? Well, yeah, but guess what? There's 32 guys in the weight class in nationals, or 33, I guess it is, right? But like, there's so many. There's a dozen other guys who are as talented as him. But it's not about the talent. It's about the work ethic. It's about the discipline. It's the ability to get up one more time every time after you fail. And that's the common theme between these folks and between all successful people is they've just failed more. You know, I say in my TEDx talk is, you know, if you want to double your success rate, double your failure rate. It's just part of success. And that was a Tom Watson from IBM quote. So, yeah, it's been fascinating to see and to reveal these stories of failure so that we can all understand and learn that our path to success is going to be through failure. It's impossible to go from where you're at to where you want to go without experiencing some failure, setback, obstacles, adversity. And so it's been a great lesson for me, and I think of people who listen get a lot out of it too.
What's the one thing that you feel like has been the most fulfilling about having your own little side business and being able to do the speaking and be able to interview these people and use the podcast to really leverage your knowledge that you've developed as a wrestler and somebody who's worked within college administration and knowing how people's brain works from one way to the other? I mean, what's been the most beneficial thing about, JimHarshawJr.com?
I'll give you, I just pulled up my page of testimonials, and this is what's been most rewarding. And I do this. It's a little side business. It's a lot of fun. I mean, it's so rewarding. But here's when I get emails like this. This is why I do it. He said, "Jim, I'm shattering goals. I'm shattering the goals I've set for myself already. I feel pretty much unstoppable. Every aspect of my life has been affected positively." And he's actually the executive director of Beat the Street Toronto. Neil Ewers. He took my course and I get emails like that all the time, not only from people who take my course, but people who just listen to the podcast, and that's why I do it. It's fun for me, and I just interviewed a guy recently who said some of the effect of this guy's been through tremendous hardship, and he talked about, if you experience this horrible thing in your life and you just sit on it, then it's wasted. But if you experience challenge and struggle and adversity and you share it with people and share how your life became actually better for it, how you are a better person because you experienced that, and how their life can be better, then the world's a better place. Then you've not wasted your experience. And I think back to my experience as a wrestler, and I don't want all the lessons that I learned to be wasted, because I learned a lot of tough lessons, and we all have. Anybody that's been on the wrestling mat has learned these lessons, and it's just been really rewarding to share them.
What's been your favorite episode so far?
Well, the Jason Bryant episode.
Well, naturally,
but was at 32. So JimHarshawJr.com/32. You know what? Favorite episode? Man, it's hard to pinpoint one. I'll give you one. Episode right after I had you on, I had Dr. Rob Gilbert of the Success Hotline on. So Dr. Gilbert I didn't know he was connected to wrestling initially, but so he has the Success Hotline. Jason, he's left a voicemail every single day since I think either 1991 or 1992, every day, a little short motivational voice message. You can call his number. I'll give it to you right now for the listener. 973-743-4690. So again, 973-743-4690. If you call that number once a day, you'll get this awesome little message. It's like 3 to 5 minutes long. Guy is absolutely incredible. He's got so many stories, so many positive messages, and that show, he's become sort of a mentor for me in terms of public speaking and different things that I'm doing. He's connected with some other guys, and he's been doing some speak. He just did a talk in Port Jervis, New York, with Jared Kamar and some of those guys up there who listen to my podcast and have taken my course. And now Dr. Gilbert is working with those guys. So he's just an inspirational individual and someone who brings a ton of value to the world. And it was a really fun conversation. So anybody can listen to that. Just go to JimHarshawJr.com/33, or if you go to iTunes and search for Success Through Failure, and then just go to episode 33. So that's a great episode.
What's been the most eye-opening experience as far as trying to actually put a podcast together? I've got 19 on my network. I host 10 of them. I know the trials and tribulations, but what was one of the things, like, I'm going to start a podcast. And then,
right.
Then you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah, it's harder than it sounds. Getting it off the ground is anyway. Once you get rolling, it's kind of, you build your systems and whatnot, but it's the time that it's time consuming. You got to plan you got to find the guest, and you plan the episodes, you get them the information, they get you some information back, and then you do the interview. You've got to have the right audio, and I've screwed up the audio so many times, and, called you and said, hey, Jason, man, I totally blew it on this episode. How do I clean the audio up? And you help me out with that. But that's just it's number one, it's been, it's time consuming. It's work. Like anything, it's harder than it looks, right? But the other biggest surprise is how giving people are and how willing they are to share their story of failure. Because it's like nobody wants to share when they failed, right? But I've been able to get people to really pull back the curtain and talk, the Bob Bowlesbys of the world, and the Chris Spieler, who's a superstar in the CrossFit world. Get those guys to pull back the curtain and talk about the time they failed. It's been pretty cool.
All right, let's shift gears back to this season in college wrestling. And we briefly spoke at the Virginia duels. Virginia, your Cavs got upended by a pretty feisty North Dakota State team, and then coming off a loss at Castle against Virginia Tech. But when you look at it now, and I have this conversation with people who don't understand what it was like prior to the funding increase. Like when Coach Simons was the coach at Old Dominion and I was living with all the guys on the team, they were pretty bleak days. I mean, we're like, all right, we got one qualifier this year. That was like a good thing. And like, all right, well, we got to beat VMI. No disrespect to VMI, but like that's who you're trying to beat. Now you've got both programs seeing, nationally ranked most years. And then it's got to probably excite you as an alum to know that, like, man, we used to not be really very good, and now we're nationally ranked consistently. We've got guys. We're bringing in good recruiting classes. I mean, when you're an alum and you see your program make a turn like that, how does that make you feel? Because I know how it makes me feel. Oh
yeah, it's great. It's funny because you look at, I'll use our baseball program as an example. They're perennial powerhouse. Like they're in the running for the national championship a lot of the years, and they're in the top 5, top 10 in the country, so like really elite. But like 15 years ago and prior, they were either mediocre or bad most years, but if you say like, hey, I played baseball for Virginia, and but you played 20, 30 years ago, it's like people just put you in this picture of like you were a part of this elite program. And,
I'm having a story right now. My buddy Charlie, who's from Minnesota, he's telling me, he's like, yeah, I wrestled Old Dominion. Oh, wow, you guys are really good. He's just like, no. Yeah.
right. Well, that's kind of how I feel. We were solid, when I was there, and Lenny was the coach, and like you said, we had 2 All-Americans my senior year. But now that we're fully funded and everything, like it's been a top 10 program, and having multiple time All-Americans now, and just winning 2 ACC championships in the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, I guess now. It's a different. The program's really at a different level. So when you say you're from Aggressor, Virginia, it's like carries more weight. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it used to be like I'd wear the Old Dominion sweatshirt, like okay, yeah. Just more or less to support wrestling, knowing that in that era we weren't very good. Now it's just like, oh yeah, right. You're like the year Ryan Williams made the finals. Like I'm wearing my. Right. I'm happy for Rhino. It's like I was like, yeah, Old Dominion Ryan Williams. I was like, that never would happen. At this time, that was 2009. That would have never happened 10 years ago. But
back in our day, right?
Yeah, you're making us both feel old. Now we're gonna move into I still have. Maybe you can help me figure this out. I got this. Not most, but there are a lot of podcasts I know. Like, Entrepreneur on Fire, EO Fire. You can't say that anymore. I can't say entrepreneur anymore because it's like it's trademarked by Entrepreneur Magazine. But anyway, John Lee Dumas.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's why he changed it to EO Fire. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, everything's on fire.
I'm going to be on that show. I'm going to be on the show pretty soon.
Yeah, I've waited until I've got to wait till Matt Talk really hits stride before I approach him again. But anyway, he does. He's got those little rapid fire questions and stuff, and I've never quite figured out what to call mine because the show is called Short Time, and this segment would be perfect to be called Short Time. And I don't want to say rapid fire or sudden victory or any. I got enough cheesy titles in my network for these shows. So anyway, Jim, the long reason I said that is I've got 10 questions. In 90 seconds, do you think you can answer them, and are you ready for the challenge?
Bring it on. Let's do it.
3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, number 1, favorite person to follow on Twitter.
Favorite person to follow on Twitter is John Gordon. A lot of great positive quotes and good stuff.
I won the Olympic gold medal. What are you having for dinner?
Pizza. Can't go wrong with pizza.
Who's the best wrestler people don't talk about?
Best wrestler people don't talk about. Lincoln McElravy. I mean, some people talk about him, but he was a 3-time national champion. He lost, runner-up 1 year lead, lost to Steve Marionetti, but Lincoln McElravy, Iowa.
Yeah, and you tell a story about him beating you pretty good, too, in one of your episodes as well.
Yeah, it was close in the beginning, and then they blew the whistle. And then,
all-time favorite flavor of Gatorade?
Michael's favorite flavor, citrus cooler.
Favorite video game of all time?
Favorite Tetris.
Okay, that makes sense. Favorite international wrestler?
Oh, favorite international wrestler. Satyev.
What move would you rather have in your arsenal, the John Smith low single or the Jordan Burroughs double?
Oh, man, the double is so much, looks so much cooler. So the double, I can't do a double.
Who's one guy from history you'd like to wrestle, regardless of weight class?
Oh, man, are you serious? That's a great one. Abe Lincoln.
Funniest teammate?
Martise Harding. No one will remember him, but he was a national qualifier.
Yeah, I remember him.
You remember Martise?
Yeah, I remember him. All right, at number 10, what is your spirit animal?
Oh, man, my spirit animal is a bear.
And we have a bonus question. Those of you from the University of Virginia will know exactly what this means. Jim Harshaw, have you ever streaked the lawn?
Oh, my goodness. Too many times. Can't count on one hand.
All right. You made it out of whatever the heck we're going to call it. I think it's better that we don't have a name for it because that gives me the setup to say we don't have a name for this each and every time.
Yeah, this would be the we don't have a name for it segment.
Let me tell you, while we got time to go, a brief lawn story. So I'm in Old Dominion, and my roommate, my first freshman year, and I say that specifically, first freshman year, was a guy, he went to Albemarle High School named Justin Butler, and he played soccer up there in Albemarle's in Charlottesville. And so the next year, I had started following this band around called the Two Skinny Jays. They were pretty big in Virginia. I'm sure you might have seen them accidentally a time or two, but I started following them around, recording their shows when they were in the area. And we went up to Charlottesville, this place called Trax, which was a great little music club. And it was the Cottonmouth Kings, Shooty's Groove, and the Two Skinny Jays, which to this day is still one of my favorite small club concerts I've ever seen in my life. So Justin's from Charlottesville. We're driving around campus, and I'd never been on campus here. It's probably 1999. And we're driving down these huge palatial columns. I'm like, man, this place is gorgeous. You know, he's talking about how awesome Bodo's Bagels is. And, you know, generally just showing me the tour from a guy that grew up in Charlottesville that doesn't go to UVA, but still loves UVA. Driving through, he goes, yeah, you see that? That's the lawn, the big grass bowl through the middle of all these buildings. And he said, yeah, people run through there naked. It's called streaking the lawn. And I'm like, Justin? He goes, what? I go, there's a couch on fire. The couch just happens to be on fire right in the middle of him telling me this, and there's people around it roasting marshmallows. So I get told that somebody's streaking the lawn and somebody had set it on fire. You were actually in school at that time, so I'm thinking you may be a culprit there. But Jim, always
I might have been involved. I'm not going to admit whether it was or wasn't, though.
Always good talking, whether it be about wrestling or podcasting or general nerd stuff. But just as we close, just give us a pitch again, what they can find on JimHarshawJr.com and you know, your thoughts for the wrestling season as we finish up here.
Yeah, well, likewise, Jason, it's always great to talk to you. Keep doing what you're doing because this is the kind of stuff that can grow the sport. You're making it easier for fans to be fans. They can drive down the road and they can listen to a story. They can talk wrestling. They can hear wrestling on their radio whenever they're driving or working out, whatever. So keep doing what you're doing. JimHarshawJr.com, all my social media is there. Just Jim Harshaw Jr. or Jim Harshaw on Twitter, Jim Harshaw Jr. on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Jim Harshaw Jr. as well. And the podcast, just search for Success Through Failure or search my name and you'll find it on iTunes. And man, my thoughts for the season are, you know, I'm as big a wrestling fan as anybody, but really what I care most about is growing the sport. So, make a gift back to your program, show up and support your program, talk about wrestling, get people out to a match and grow the sport.
And just to make things a little easier for you, if you're not attuned with searching iTunes, go to MattTalkOnline.com/directory. Scroll down below the 19 Matt Talk shows, and you'll see a section that's called Other Wrestling Podcasts and podcasts that often feature wrestling. You can find Success with Failure in there as well. So that's got a listing of every wrestling podcast that I can find or loosely associated with wrestling. There's Chael Sonnen, for example, is in there and shows that often feature wrestling. But Jim is in the directory, MattTalkOnline.com/directory. Check out Jim's show. You will not be, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Disappointed. Yeah, that's right. I'm a writer and I can't come up with words. Anyway, yeah, you will be impressed. You will not be ashamed of downloading this podcast. So, Jim, always a pleasure. Let's go back to work and make some money.
Likewise. Thanks, Jason.
You are listening to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast with my daddy, Jason Bryant.
All right, I'm pretty stoked about that bumper there. That was my 4.5-year-old daughter, Lucy, doing a drop for Daddy's show. So one of Daddy's shows. So I am Lucy makes her first appearance on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, although she's a little young to go into the deep dive that I did with Abby back in November. Abby being my wife, of course. A lot of people did listen to that show, so really appreciate that. So as you are now you may or may not be aware of this, but it's the end of January, early part of February, depending on when you're listening. And if you're listening before the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships in 2017, this information is pertinent to you. The preview guide is on sale. The pre-orders are now open. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it is the biggest, baddest digital preview guide ever assembled. Year 3 of the Matt Talk Online Division I Championships Preview Fan Guide. This thing digitally delivered. It is optimized for your iPad, your tablet. It is going to be over 200 pages of facts and stats, every result, every wrestler for the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships at the Scott Trade Center in St. Louis. Now, I'm going to be dangling this out there. I've had to raise the price on a little bit because there's a lot more that goes into it. I'm spending a lot more time on it, so it is going to retail at $19.99 this year. However, because you are a listener to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, you are going to use the promo code podcast. So when you go to matttalkonline.com/fanguide17, matttalkonline.com/fanguide17. And when you click order, you can pre-order it now. The pop-up will come up and there will be a offer code. You will enter the word podcast and you will save $5. That is not something I'm putting out on social media. This is something you get. You listen to this show, you're going to get that discount. And, I'm going to have Adam Amin from ESPN on the show here next episode. He is going to basically rave about this thing. Everything you want to know about Division I college wrestling tournament in Scott Trade Center, the national championships, for your pick'em contests, for your little fantasy leagues. Now, I do not condone gambling. Gambling is illegal at Bushwood, and I never slice. Well, you may not slice, but make sure you buy this guide. I really have amped it up. Last year, it is something that I provide to ESPN. Their Matt Side broadcasters use it. Their play-by-play, their crew uses it. Anthony Robles, Tim Johnson, Adam Amin, they've all used it. They've got it. Their production crew's got it. They're getting the stats. This is the stuff that the professionals I am providing. Now you can get it too. matttalkonline.com/fanguide17. It will be digitally delivered to you via email with a unique download link on March the 14th. I basically do all this stuff from the road because I'll be at the Pac-12s, the NAIs, the D3s. I'll be developing all this guide information. It will have every conference tournament result. It will have historical archives. It has the charts, the winningest coaches, the most trophy teams, the All-Americans by school in terms of how they rank alphabetically, how they rank numerically. Do you know that Minnesota and Iowa have 90 All-Americans since 2000? Since the turn of the century, those two teams are number one, tied for number one with number of All-Americans since the turn of the century. Did you know that? Well, guess what? You do now because it's going to be in that guide. matttalkonline.com/fanguide17. There is nothing like this. Nothing like this. A couple hundred of you got it last year. I think a couple thousand of you should get it this year. It is something that I put a lot of work in, too. And it's something that, again, you cannot find. Ask Shane Sparks from the Big Ten Network. He'll talk about it. Ask anybody that's ever seen this thing. You will not be disappointed. Unlike anything else in college wrestling. Unlike anything else. matttalkonline.com/fanguide17. Pre-orders available now. Digitally delivered to you March 14th. And I answer every single customer service email myself. So if you've got a question, be sure to let me know. That's all I got right now. Jim Harshaw, fantastic guest, good dude, all around just jovial character. Very, very, very good. Very good speaker, too. Jim's a good guy. Known him a long, long time. We were in college at the same time. And kind of makes me feel old realizing that, wait a minute, I was in college in the 90s and we're here at 2017. And, oh, man. Anyway, that's all I got for today. Jim Harshaw, Adam Amin coming up on the show soon. Raleigh Peterkin going to come up on the show soon. Sarah Levin going to come up on the show soon. A lot of things you can do. So in lieu of the by the way, I meant to mention this. You've heard me talk about joining the team, becoming a patron of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. Now, you go to matttalkonline.com/join the team. You hit the certain level of patronage, and I believe it's the $10 a month level. You will get the guide as part of your perks. So if you want to contribute to this network, matttalkonline.com/join the team. One of the perks is you will get the championship digital preview guide. Yeah, it's part of the perks. So if you are contributing to this network year round, that's something you're just going to get. So team members out there, you're already a member of the team at that level. You know who you are. Don't buy it because you're getting it for free. So you can buy it one off, or you can contribute. Words. You can contribute year round and make sure you're going to get this every single year now. The Fargo Almanac also comes with that, which is you buy that once, you get free updates, but you buy it, you got it. So you're going to get two of the best digital products the sport of wrestling has to offer by joining the team, matttalkonline.com/join the team. But if you just want the guide, matttalkonline.com/fanguide17. That's all I got. Thank you for spending your time with me, because say it with me now, you've always got time for short time. Yeah, for short time. I got to get my daughter saying that. Maybe that's next show.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to matttalkonline.com.